Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Jedd Fisch, the Washington Huskies going across the country, squaring off against Rutgers Friday night. Fascinating matchup between two teams that I just feel like are flying under the radar. You look at Rutgers, quite frankly, I think Rutgers should probably be a top 25 team in the country. Really impressive win against Virginia Tech on Saturday. And you look at Washington and say, look, this team should probably be 4-0. A very impressive win against Northwestern on Saturday, but I think more importantly, you go back to Washington State. One, credit to Washington State. That's a surprisingly very solid football team with a difference maker at quarterback. But I think more importantly, you look at that game and say, you outgained Washington State by 70 yards. You had 16 penalties for a buck 35. There were a lot of plays in that football game that Washington could have won the game on, just didn't make the plays. I'm not much of a shoulda, coulda, woulda type of guy. I think Washington very well could have won that football game and has an opportunity to kind of get back some of that momentum that's been building for Washington Friday night at Rutgers. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, most importantly for this game, you got a spread of inside of 3 points. Let it fly in the comment section. A lot of different ways you can look at this football game. Would love to hear from you guys, whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me. That's, excuse me, the beauty of doing these game previews and predictions. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. The support has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with this Rutgers offense that's been, again, small sample size, 3 games, really only one game you got tested against Virginia Tech, been more explosive than we're used to seeing a Rutgers offense. Now, it's still the Greg Schiano team, right? They're running the football 65% of the time. That's 7th most in the country. I have one of the best running backs in the country in Kyle Monangai. The number that pops out to me for Rutgers, and something that we've been talking about over the last couple of years, hey, we know you want to grind teams down. We know you want to run the football consistently, but can you be a little bit more explosive in the passing attack in 2024? Take a look at the numbers. And 10.4 yards per pass attempt, that's top 10 in the country. Like, that's exactly what we're looking for. We're not asking Rutgers to throw the football 60 times a football game, but we are looking for them to kind of be a little bit more explosive when they decide to throw. I think they really hit in the transfer portal with Dymere Miller coming from Monmouth. This Rutgers offense, it looks and feels a little bit different. Now, you look at the Washington defense, this is one of the more pleasant surprises that I think you've seen to start 2024. Look, I had massive concerns. The Washington fans who've been rocking with the boys for the last couple of weeks and months know I was concerned about the depth of the defensive line. And I think you're going to get tested against Rutgers, again, a team that wants to run the football a lot. This Washington defense won 12.7 points per game allowed. That's 12th in the country. Most importantly, only 2.9 yards per carry allowed. That's 16th best in the country. That's not something I had on my bingo card for this Washington program. I think they have a really good secondary. I'm not surprised to see them only giving up a 46% completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks. But my question was, in the front seven, going into the Big Ten, are they going to be deep and good enough along the lines of scrimmage? And I think so far through 4 games, you kind of got your answer that this Washington team is holding up. And again, Rutgers is going to make you hold up because they're going to run the football a lot. You look at the keys to this football game. One, the pass protection of Rutgers, which has been elite. They've given up 3 quarterback hurries all season. Now, that number is artificially low because Rutgers does not throw the football that much. Going up against the Washington pass rush that's sacking the quarterback 10.2% of the time, that's 11th in the country. If you're looking at how to evaluate this football game, I think it starts with, can Washington stop the run on first and second down and then get after the passer when Rutgers is kind of in those third and long situations? That's not where Rutgers wants to operate. So if Washington can stop the run like they've had early in the season, I think it puts them in a good spot to win this football game against Rutgers. Now, flipping sides, Rutgers defense solid. I think the one number that kind of sticks out to you that you're not used to seeing, and again, I think the numbers early on in the season are a little bit, they're not necessarily the most accurate, reflecting you only have 3 games of a sample size. 6.5 yards per carry given up. That's 128th in the country. I think Rutgers' run defense is pretty dang good. I know they lose what I thought was one of the best linebackers in the country heading into the season. They've had a few guys really step up at that linebacker spot. Here's the kicker for Washington. especially on the offensive side of the football. Like you go back and watch the games, you look at the numbers and say 24.3 points per game, that's 76 in the country. But then you watch the games and say that doesn't add up. This Washington offense looks a lot better than 76 scoring offense in the country. Well, you look at yards per play, 6.6 yards per play, that's top 20 in the country. That sounds more like it. Washington needs to do a couple of different things well. One, they got to be better on special teams. And I think more importantly, they got to operate better in the red zone, settling for too many field goals, not executing the right way in the red zone. Look, if you want to win at a high level, you go back to Washington last year, elite in the red zone with Michael Penix. Do you want to win at the highest level in college football? You have to score touchdowns in the red zone. Washington hasn't been great at doing that to start the season. You're not going to get a ton of opportunities to be in the red zone against Rutgers. They're going to limit the amount of possessions in this football game. And quite frankly, their defense is very good. When you go inside the red area, you got to come away with 6-7 points. This Washington team on the ground, the Washington fans know. I think Jonah Coleman's a top 5 running back in the country. And I know that might be a hot take, but you look at the numbers. You look at the numbers from last year. You look at the numbers this year. It backs it up. You look at Jonah Coleman, he's averaging 6.7 yards per carry, 29 missed tackles forced on only 53 carries. That is about as an impressive number as you'll see. Jonah Coleman just doesn't go down. He is a muscle hamster. He's got a thick lower half, low pads. I think Jonah Coleman is one of the better running backs in the country, and they are riding him. There's a pretty even split in terms of pass and run in Jedd Fisch, and we're not used to seeing that, right? You think Jedd Fisch at Arizona throwing the football. Like Washington's been leaning on this offensive line, been leaning on Jonah Coleman, and it's been really effective. Then you have a true freshman in Adam Muhammad who's been phenomenal as a true freshman. You look at the passing attack, really efficient, 9.5 yards per pass attempt, 639 yards after the catch. That's one of the matchups that if you are Washington, you probably want to attack is the speed that you have on the outside with guys like Giles Jackson against a Rutgers defense that probably wants to play you a little bit more in a phone booth. Like Rutgers wants to play 12 personnel. They want to run the football. And that's kind of how this team is built. I think Washington can maybe play that style, but if you look at the kind of game Washington might want to play, you might want to play this game a little bit more out on the perimeter. I think Jedd Fisch, at one, he's been, I think, a masterclass in terms of designing an offense around Will Rogers. Look, we know Will Rogers doesn't have a elite NFL caliber arm like Michael Penix did. Jedd Fisch has built an offense that it kind of just utilizes what Will Rogers is really good at. He's super accurate in the short intermediate route trees. He's always throwing the football on time and accurately. Jedd Fisch isn't asking Will Rogers to consistently push the ball down the field, but more importantly, he's just getting his wide receivers the football in space. And you have guys like Giles Jackson who are elite. Giles Jackson might not be an elite wide receiver, but he's an elite playmaker. When you get the football into his hands, he is extremely dangerous. I think Giles Jackson's probably the X factor in this game because, again, the Rutgers defense in terms of team speed, they probably want to play this more in a phone booth. Washington might have the ability to get some of their playmakers in space. Getting into the pick, and this is a brutal pick, right? Rutgers sitting at 3-point favorites at home. It's a long road trip. I think this Rutgers team is a very, very well-coached team and just super solid all around. Give me the Washington Huskies. And give me the Washington Huskies because I do think this team is just a little bit undervalued because of that loss against Washington State. If you make 2 or 3 plays in that football game, you're probably looking at a 4-0 Washington team that's ranked in the top 25. And Jedd Fisch took over a program that has a lot of new faces. It took them maybe a couple of games to kind of get their feet under them in terms of who are playmakers, what is the identity of this football team. I think that might have cost them against Washington State. Really impressed with what they look like against Northwestern. I think this Washington team, it kind of comes down to what quarterback do I trust a little bit more. Calic McManus has been really good. Trust Will Rogers. He's played a lot more football. He's played at a higher level during his career. 2 really good coaches, Greg Schiano, Jedd Fisch. Wouldn't really give an edge to either of them. Different style coaches, but 2 very good coaches that I respect a ton. And give me the Washington Huskies to cover that number. I think this is a 1-possession game. Going to be very close. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.